What we've seen is a very significant and disturbing development, with an extra 28 charges being laid against the former National President of the Australian Labor Party and President of the Health Services Union. Michael Williamson had previously faced a number of charges. We now have an extra 28. I understand that now brings a total of 48 charges against him, which is, of course, separate to the 35 civil charges being faced by Craig Thompson. So between them, from the Health Services Union alone, 2 officials are facing 85 charges.
These are criminal charges, though, and this is one individual in the Health Services Union. The Manager of Opposition Business, Mr Pine, says the Prime Minister can't escape the fact that she's linked to Michael Williamson, but she's linked to Michael Williamson only in the sense that he was a member of the same party. How can the Prime Minister be held responsible for the alleged deeds of someone else?
One would assume that the National President of the Australian Labor Party and the leader of the Labor Party, as in the Parliamentary Party, may have had some interaction from time to time. So Michael Williamson was not just an ordinary rank-and-file member. He was the National President of the ALP. He sat on the ACTU executive. He was Labor blue blood. He was Labor royalty.
But that still doesn't say that the Prime Minister should know what he does or allegedly does in his day-to-day work.
It is hard to imagine that other people within the ALP and the trade union boss elite did not know what was going on. I understand other people are to be charged. Who they will be, we don't know, and we will have to see how this case develops. Suffice to say that a scam of the proportion alleged, one would imagine, will have other people involved and implicated in it.
But isn't it a stretch, is the point that I'm getting at, that the Prime Minister is asked to explain why she didn't act to deal with the misappropriation of funds when she wouldn't have known?
We are talking about a former National President of the Australian Labor Party. One assumes that others may have known.
But the Prime Minister, you wouldn't expect that she would know.
Well, one would expect that there would be interaction between the National President of the organisation and the National Parliamentary leader.
But that's still a big stretch to say interaction and then knowing that alleged misdeeds were taking place.
Well, there had been rumours circulating for some time, and of course we now know that the police are satisfied in relation to those rumours that they have now laid these 40-plus charges against Mr Williamson.
And we've seen reports relating to the CFMEU today. What do you know about this report? Have you been advised of any of the detail of this?
The first I heard of the report was late yesterday, that the Financial Review would be printing a story this morning, and sure enough it appeared on the front page indicating another union slush fund being used to siphon money. And when I say slush fund, I should be saying a fund for good reason, for good purposes, namely alcohol and drug rehabilitation, but then the union using it as a slush fund and diverting funds from it, which has led to people resigning from that particular fund out of concern as to where the money has gone. So what we've seen is the HSU situation, now the CFMEU. We know the Prime Minister still has issues in relation to the Australian Workers' Union scandal from the 90s. We also have the Electrical Trade Union buying a mansion, waterside mansion, for one of its officials in Sydney, and it appears as though that every day there is another chapter being published in relation to union slush funds, where the union bosses are acting like warlords over their fiefdoms and just using the funds of union members for their own personal purposes. And if I were an HSU member today, I'd be very concerned that Michael Williamson has now been charged with an extra 28 offences. If I were a CFMEU member, I'd be most concerned that money is allocated to the rehabilitation of drug and alcohol affected workers has been siphoned off for other purposes.
That is only that's only two unions. There are many, many other unions. Do you concede that the vast majority do a good job in representing workers' interests?
Overwhelmingly, I think unions have played a very good and important role within Australia's industrial landscape, so don't get me wrong. But we were promised that when the Craig Thomson issues first were raised, it was just one bad apple. Now, as the days go by, we see another bad apple in the HSU with Michael Williamson. We now see it in the ETU, the CFMEU, the Australian Workers' Union. One wonders what the next allegation will be.
On to the issue that went through the Parliament late yesterday through the House of Representatives on workers' entitlements, workers made redundant and the Commonwealth support for those workers. The Coalition didn't support the bill that Bill Shorten put forward. You wanted to cap it, the redundancy entitlements, to 16 weeks. Is that good enough for workers that have been in a job for 20 years, for example?
The scheme was initially introduced by the Howard government. So as far as principle goes, we in the Coalition have a very proud record. The Hawke-Keating government were there for 13 years and did not put up a scheme such as we put up. So what Labor have sought to do is increase it even further and create a standard which in fact goes beyond the Fair Work Australia standard by simply legislating that for every year of service you would get 4 weeks of redundancy. So if you've been working for, as you say, 20 years, then you would get 80 weeks of redundancy payment. Now that sets up a huge standard, and if that then becomes an accepted standard within industry, that will unfortunately act as a disincentive for new employees being taken on. So we have to be careful with the balancing of this.
But is 16 weeks appropriate for someone who's been in a job for 2 decades?
In the circumstances, we believe in general terms, yes it is, and it is in tune with the normal Fair Work Australia standard, and that is why we had the proposal as we did when we were in government. What Labor are trying to do now is extend it in a way that we are concerned will act as a disincentive to employment, and given that unemployment is slowly rising, we don't want to see any more disincentives to employers employing more Australians.
Senator Abetz, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.